So another fun new car. Today we will discuss hot hatches and the best drivetrain. Will it be a mid-engine rear-wheel drive like the Clio with the 6-cylinder, for example, or would it be a front-engine rear-wheel drive like BMW 130i, or would it be front-engine front-wheel drive like, for example, the Suzuki Swift Sport that I'm driving currently? So first things first, I start with the worst, Clio V6. So this car was very nice, that it has more of a really sports car configuration, so very playful, which was very nice. But why is this then the worst? If you compare it with the Clio 2-liter 16-volt front-wheel drive Clio RS, the regular one, it was only marginally faster. How could that be the case? Because it was so much heavier, because the big engine that they used and the wider tires. So it had like 250 horsepower, while the Clio RS had 172 to 182 horsepower of that generation. I think that the best Clio V6 had 265 horsepower out of the 3-liter engine. So nice, but it was also quite heavy for a hot hatch. So that would take into consideration a lot. A heavy car means that you need more horsepower to have similar performance. And the Clio RS was very light. A lightweight car means that you need a lot less horsepower for similar performance. Also, if you would compare it, you could strip the Clio RS even a lot more and then make it a lot lighter to have similar seating arrangement, because this was Clio RS is normally a 5-seater and the Clio V6 was normally a 2-seater, always 2-seater, because in the mid there is the engine sitting, so you're losing seating capacity. You only have a 2-seater, which is not a hot hatch in my opinion, and it's a very big problem. And the second very big problem is that you have a car that cannot have room to take stuff with you, so the practical parts. You cannot fold down the rear seats and have a very big access. It was very limited because the engine is sitting there. So you have all the drawbacks in place. And that's a thing compared to, again, additional complexity for a car that is not overly powerful. That's not such a big thing in my opinion. So that's the worst. The second worst, and this could be controversial, is a front engine rear wheel drive 130i, 135i, 140i, that are the main contestants. So BMW fanboys, be aware. I have a friend who has a 130i, 265 horsepower, top version, naturally aspirated, quite light, very good performance, very good horsepower, even up there with the turbo boys like the Focus ST, and a lot more power than the normal naturally aspirated boys like the Clio RS at that time. Or for example the Civic Type R. It was on par with the 2-liter turbo of the Megane RS. A little bit less torque, but more horsepower. So very cool car. Also very playful, not too heavy. And with a car that is being rear-wheel driven, you feel a push. So you feel yourself being pushed instead of being pulled, like with a front-wheel drive car. But why? Why then would I still say, okay, have a front-wheel drive car? Because that's the last one available. But I have a bonus one, the 4-wheel drive car. Like for example, Lancia Delta Integrale. So that will be my bonus. The thing is that when you make power at the front and you push that through a tunnel with a cardan axle to the back. Yes? And that has benefits, a little bit more playful, so less understeer, more oversteer. But that's also being counted more and more because of electronics and safety requirements. So the playfulness of the rear-wheel drive cars are being squashed, and that of the front-wheel drive car are exploited more and more, because there was still a lot of safety margin to be exploited. So you have that tunnel. So power is made at one end and used at the other end. So that means that you have additional parts, being that tunnel and that axle and an axis at the rear. But you still need the engine at the front to be cooled. The best way to be cooled. So you don't have any room on the trunk, and you don't have any room in the interior to that axle, and you have a driving axle, so the cardan axle driving it to the back, and then you have a driving axle that's also intruding a little bit in your trunk. So those are all compromised. Also, you need a longer nose which looks pretty and more sporting, a little bit more. There's a big engine under there. It must be there. And why is that the hood so long? Because you cannot place an engine like this when you have front wheel drive, because it's directly sitting above the axle. You have to place it like this because you have rear wheel drive, because it first has to be transferred to the back, in this direction, to that drive shaft, and then only then it will be transferred to the other direction again. So that's that. A lot less room. So the 130i of my friend has similar interior space, which is, while it is a class bigger and higher and fatter and heavier as a result than this Swiss Sport of this generation, ZC33S. So you're losing interior space, that's going down, weight is going up, complexity is going up. You will also lose horsepower and fuel consumption. So fuel consumption, you have more friction, more parts, and horsepower, because also there's a parasitic loss through the drivetrain, so you don't have as much efficient horsepower going to the wheels. You have the benefit of more playfulness, and if you accelerate hard, especially at low speeds, you will transfer weight to the back, because your nose comes up and the back dives down, so you squat down on the wheels that have the ability to transfer the power, so that's beneficial for traction. But under wrong conditions, when you're not driving fast, but you have, for example, muddy conditions or rain or ice or snow, then it's a drawback, because you're driving not that fast and there's little weight on the wheels that are being driven, while there's a lot of weight on the front wheel drive cars, because the engine is sitting on top of the front wheels even when the car is stagnant, so it's just sitting there. So you have direct traction, and that's beneficial. Also, you will remove all those other factors, and the hothatch needs to be playful. And to have, for example, the 130i that has similar interior space than this, it has a drawback that it has 30% about more weight, and you cannot solve 30% more weight in the playfulness or how direct the car will be by just having rear wheel drive. And you could say, okay, then just get an engine with less horsepower and rear wheel drive. You could do that, but then you will lose a lot. The parasitic loss is especially there when you don't have that much power. So the less power you will have a higher relative issue with the parasitic loss. So that's something to take into consideration. So it's better to have a little bit more power, like the 3-liter 6-cylinder, than with a smaller engine. So that are some things to take into consideration, which really makes the front wheel drive car the best option in my opinion. A hothatch does not need to have enormous amount of power. It needs to be playful, it needs to be light, it needs to be capable, that you have a practical use, that you still can seat a lot of people. Also to have that hatchback folding capacity, that you have a lot of interior room to take with you stuff. And it needs to be accessible also, that you can use it every time, also under less perfect conditions, traction for example, but also that it's not that costly, and that all those complexity introducing factors will have a detrimental effect on the CO2, for example the fuel consumption, which also are directed in taxes that we have in the Netherlands, but also might be other places. Also road tax is based on weight, that also adds. Also if your insurance is based on weight, it also adds to that. And you need a bigger engine and more other things to still make it playful. If it's heavier to begin with, you need a bigger engine to have the same power to weight. If you are losing more, you need a bigger engine to still have the same power to the wheels. If you have a bigger and heavier car, because you don't have you have the intrusion, and you have to make up for that with a bigger car to begin with, you have more weight. If you have a longer bonnet, because the motor needs to sit in that direction, you have more weight, and less compact, so less playful. Also, if you have all those components, you need also have bigger brakes to have the same braking distance. You have to have bigger axles for all that power to deal with. You have to have wider tires for the traction, etc., etc. And it all adds up to the weight and weight and weight. And a pure lightweight car, hothatch, is therefore not that much accessible. Then the last component, four-wheel drive car. Those have the traction, they have the bonnet and the engine displacement in there, the same as front-wheel drive cars, so no much overhang. And then they have also an axle that goes through, like the rear-wheel drive cars, that transfers the power also to the back. Now, in that way you have the most parasitic loss and then less fuel mileage, so to say, in that configuration, but you have the best traction. Also the weight will be the highest, of course, with all the complexities, the most complex system. You have driving axles on both sides now, but you have, especially with a lot of horsepower, so for example even the Yaris GR, but especially over 300 horsepower, because Civic Type R still deals with it, over 300 horsepower with front wheel drive. But then all-wheel drive is the best, and at this time they also have a very special version, so they have a hothatch coupling, for example in the Volkswagen Audi group, that they have front-wheel drive even in the Golf R as standard, and the RS3 of Audi, and only if needed it also transfers power to the rear. So you have a little bit less parasitic loss that way, because you only have the parasitic loss to a very small degree going to the back wheels. And the extra complexity therein, that you have that diversion, that this goes both, it has the option to both go to the rear and to the front wheels, and of course the added weight, etc., that comes with the system. But it's still quite limited, still very good system, but still you have the intrusion here of that axle and the added complexity. But with hyper hatches, all-wheel drive is the way to go. All-wheel drive is really the way to go. If you have a lot of power, or even if you want to tune it, this will give you the best acceleration all the time, and will cover also the distance the best all the time. And still a very capable, nimble chassis, because you can have the overhang so little. That being said, if you have all those factors there, so especially if you go for 400, 500 horsepower to tune, all-wheel drive, really appreciate it. That's the best way ever. If you take all those things into consideration, and even the Lancia Delta Integrale, which has a legendary status, 186 horsepower, all-wheel drive, was a very nice hothatch. But even if you take that into consideration, it is not the hothatch that you will hear people the most about. Those are the all front-wheel drive cars. Also Clio V6, you will not hear them. 130i. Sometimes people will who are purists and wants to be pushed instead of pulled will name them, but most are naming the Peugeots. 205 GTI, 205 Rally, 106 GTI, 106 Rally, 306 GTI, 306 Rally, Clio Williams, Clio RS, not the V6 one, but 172, 182, or even the modern iteration, Megane gas, also, and the turbo derivative there. And why is that the case? Because those cars are light, nimble, accessible, and fun. And that's what a hothatch is all about. You have a practical package that you can use for everyday life, and still will turn your face into smiling galore every time you will drive it. And it's very light, the lightest and the most practical form, and also the cheapest, most accessible, so the enthusiast can just afford it. What do you have in your bedroom, on the walls of your bedroom? Perhaps an exotic car like a Ferrari or Lamborghini, but how many in percentage of the people will get to that? For me, it was always the hothatches, because that's something that's accessible to me, and I really can drive myself. What is there to chase a dream that you will never really chase? Because if you do that, you can get a Lamborghini or Ferrari, but then you perhaps will live in a shed, or or you will be worried every time you park it somewhere. With a hothatch you can just park it whatever you want because it's not that expensive, it's still accessible. And you can seat up to 5 people. You can take your family with you. Try to do that with your Ferrari or a Lamborghini if it's not a Urus. That will be very, very hard. You have to drive the same distance over and over again to take one passenger with you. But all jokes aside, that's making it so special. And all things being said, this is also why I want a hothatch like this, and I chose the one not with the most power like the Fiesta ST for this B segment. If you want a compact light car, B segment, Fiesta ST, i20N or Polo GTI would all be more powerful, but this is the lightest by 30-35%, and that's where it's at for me. Even if it's 10 to 20%, I will still look favorable on the lighter hatchback, and that's something to take into consideration. Also for you enthusiasts, the light, simple nature, and this comes fully loaded, makes it accessible, makes it fun, makes it practical, makes it an everyday type of car that you can really enjoy. Found my car? Out!